This podcast is brought to you throughout the month of November by our friends at Minimal Case. They are the cases that are so thin and light they keep your phone gorgeous and add zero bulk. It's crazy how thin these cases are. It's also crazy how cheap they are, because if you use the code DDPodcast, you'll get 25% off your order, which is pretty awesome. Just go to minimalcase.com and use the code DDPodcast, or click the link in the show notes. Once again, that's mnmlcase.com and use the promo code DDPodcast to get 25% off your order, and we thank them for sponsoring this podcast.
Good morning, Digit fam. It's day 2 of Plague Watch 2019, and Adam is still sick. Who knows when this terrible affliction will abate? But until that time, I'm your host, Sam Moore, and this is your Digit Daily podcast for November 21st. Our top story today has to do with, stop me if you've heard this one before, a cellular telephone. The Samsung Galaxy S10 Lite just got FCC certified, giving us a look at its specs, and it's all kind of odd. We've heard for a long time about Samsung's rumored new budget Galaxy phone, which would offer an alternative to the already stellar S10e. But this doesn't look like much of a budget phone. The S10 Lite will apparently sport a 6.7-inch Full HD Plus screen with the powerful Snapdragon 855 chipset, 8GB of RAM, and 128GB of storage. It's set to have a battery between 4,370 mAh and 4,500. And it's going to have a triple rear camera setup with a 48-megapixel primary sensor, 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera, and 5-megapixel depth sensor. On top of that, it's going to have a 32-megapixel selfie camera on the front, and it's even rumored to have 45-watt fast charging. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a light phone, this sure ain't it. This sounds like every bit of flagship. We still don't know anything about the price of the phone, but at this point, I just can't imagine it being terribly cheap. We won't know anything for sure until Samsung unveils the phone, but if they can nail a light level price with these specs, it will be pretty impressive. Now then, why don't we move on and get into the roundup? Google Duplex is launching in the United States and the United Kingdom, allowing people to get their Google Assistant to buy them movie tickets. Through a series of voice commands, you'll be able to use AMC, Fandango, MJR Theaters, and MovieTickets.com, as well as Odeon in the UK. Unfortunately, you still have to pay for the tickets, but who knows, maybe that feature's on the way. Speaking of Google, the tech giant just changed its policies around political advertising, and it was good? According to the New York Times, political ads displayed on Google will no longer be able to target people based on their public voting information. Google will still allow political advertisers to segment their ads by age, gender, and location, but now they won't be able to target ads at left-leaning, right-leaning, or independent demographics. As part of this move, Google also announced that while it never intentionally allowed false advertising, it is now explicitly banning political ads that make, quote, demonstrably false claims that could significantly undermine participation or trust. You know, it's easy to get cynical about tech companies and how they've affected politics, but it's nice to see one at least starting to make proactive steps. Now, if only Twitter would ban the Nazis. Speaking of companies behaving well, Uber is planning to begin recording audio of its rides. Now, I know that sounds like really bad, but it's actually meant for the security of the riders, following years of incidents in many countries around the world. According to an email obtained by the Washington Post, quote, when the trip ends, the user will be asked if everything is okay and be able to report a safety incident and submit the audio recording to Uber with a few taps. If that's all the audio is getting used for, it actually sounds alright. Who knows what the company's policy on keeping the recordings will be, especially when users say everything's fine. Regardless, this is going to be a tough feature to implement in the US, given how consent laws for recording differ from state to state. I don't know about you, but I've never been all that impressed with Honey. Not the bee byproduct, that's great, the browser plugin. Every time I've tried to use it with something I actually want to buy, there aren't any discounts available. In fact, Honey finding a discount is usually an indicator that I don't actually need whatever's in my cart. So it's surprising to see that PayPal has decided to buy the company for $4 billion. Clearly, a lot of people have had very different experiences than me with the app. Let's finish off today with the space story. SpaceX's prototype Starship rocket apparently kind of blew up during a test yesterday. The company was conducting a pressure test when the craft just kind of popped. Apparently, this wasn't entirely unexpected, as prototypes are meant for this kind of testing. Better for this to happen on the ground than in the air, after all. According to SpaceX, this isn't even much of a setback. The company will likely build a new, slightly different model to continue testing. And according to Elon Musk, ultimately, the prototype had more value as a model for manufacturing than for actual flight tests anyway. It's hard to know how much of that is spin. This stuff is complicated. After all, it's actually rocket science. And I think that's going to do it for today, folks. If you'd like to learn more about any of these stories, check out the links in the show notes and subscribe to our daily newsletter on digit.com. If you like what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, and don't forget to tell your friends about digitdailypod.com. I'm Sam Moore, I am S'mores on Twitter, and I'll see you tomorrow.